The Centauri Research Institute hung like a gleaming pearl in the void of space, its pristine white surfaces reflecting the light of 3 distant suns. Within its crystalline halls, beings from 100 worlds conducted the galaxy's most crucial scientific research. Today, those halls witnessed something unprecedented, the first human scientist to join their ranks. Dr. Isabella Rivera stood before the Institute's admission chamber, her heart pounding beneath her ceremonial white coat. The chamber's curved walls stretched upward into darkness, and 3 tiers of alien scientists observed her with expressions ranging from curiosity to unconcealed disdain. Their bioluminescent features cast an eerie glow across the chamber, creating shifting patterns that made Isabella's eyes strain to focus. Dr. Rivera, came the resonant voice of Chief Researcher Nixtal, a towering figure whose crystalline body refracted light in mesmerizing ways. Your species' application to join our terraforming initiative is unprecedented. Humanity has barely mastered interplanetary travel. What could you possibly contribute to our work? Isabella straightened her spine, pushing down the familiar sting of doubt. With respect, Chief Researcher, humanity's limited resources forced us to develop creative solutions to environmental challenges. We've restored dead zones in our oceans, reclaimed deserts, and stabilized our atmosphere after centuries of damage. We did this without the advanced technology available to other species. A ripple of dismissive clicks and whistles echoed through the chamber. From the second tier, a serpentine figure named Dr. Zixera uncoiled their length, scales shimming with neural patterns of skepticism. Creative solutions. We deal in precise science here, Dr. Rivera. The terraforming of Kepler 186f requires exact calculations and proven methodologies, not human improvisation. Before Isabella could respond, another voice joined the discussion. Dr. Rael, an energy-based being whose form flickered like Aurora Borealis, spoke with undisguised contempt. The humans' presence here is merely a political gesture. Their federation insisted on representation in exchange for access to their solar system's resources. The words cut deep, but Isabella had anticipated this reception. She'd spent months studying the Institute's past projects, identifying patterns that others might have missed. If I may, she began, activating her holoprojector. A 3-dimensional map of Kepler 186f materialized in the chamber's center, its barren surface marked with proposed terraforming sites. I've analyzed the Institute's previous attempts at terraforming. While technically flawless, they've shown a consistent pattern of failure during implementation. The systems are too rigid, too dependent on perfect conditions. Chief Researcher Nixtal's crystalline form clouded slightly, a sign of irritation. You presume to critique our methods? I offer a different perspective, Isabella countered, zooming in on a failed terraforming site. Earth's history is filled with examples of complex ecosystems emerging from chaos. Our planet's recovery from multiple extinction events proves that life finds ways to adapt and thrive in imperfect conditions. Perhaps what the Institute's approach lacks is flexibility. The chamber erupted in murmurs and electromagnetic pulses of disagreement. Dr. Zixera's scales flashed patterns of warning. Flexibility leads to unpredictability. Unpredictability leads to failure. This is basic science, human. Yet as the debate continued, Isabella noticed something curious. In the third tier, partially obscured by shadows, sat Dr. Venare, whose species was known for their quantum probability calculations. Their compound eyes studied Isabella with an intensity that suggested not dismissal, but consideration. Despite the hostility, Isabella was assigned to the Kepler 186f project team. The next weeks proved challenging as she attempted to integrate into the Institute's workflow. Her alien colleagues assigned her minimal tasks, clearly expecting her to fail. They spoke in technical languages her translator struggled with and used equipment calibrated for non-human perception. Late one night, as Isabella worked alone in her small laboratory space, she received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Venare materialized from the shadows, their probability field creating subtle distortions in the air. Your analysis of adaptive systems is intriguing, they said, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the lab's soft light. Our current models show a 73.2% chance of project failure, despite our advanced technology. Perhaps we have become too reliant on perfection. Isabella's heart leaped at this first sign of genuine engagement. On Earth, we learned that sometimes the most resilient systems are those that embrace imperfection. Nature doesn't wait for ideal conditions, it adapts, evolves, finds unexpected paths forward. Dr. Venare's probability field flickered thoughtfully. Continue your research, Dr. Rivera. Some of us are watching with more than skepticism. With that cryptic statement, they disappeared back into the shadows, leaving Isabella with a renewed sense of purpose. The following day, as Isabella reviewed the latest simulation data, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. The Institute's current terraforming approach wasn't just rigid, it was fundamentally flawed. Their perfect calculations failed to account for the chaos inherent in planetary scale changes. They were building a house of cards, and the slightest deviation would bring it all crashing down. She knew pointing this out would only intensify the hostility she faced. But as she stared at the damning data streaming across her holoscreen, Isabella realized she had no choice. Humanity's place in the galactic scientific community, and the fate of an entire planet, might depend on her finding the courage to challenge centuries of established alien wisdom. Isabella spent the next 3 cycles of the Tri-Sun system buried in research, her small lab becoming a fortress of holographic data displays and simulation models. The flaw she discovered in the Institute's terraforming approach wasn't just theoretical, it was already manifesting in their preliminary tests, though her colleagues were too convinced of their infallibility to notice the warning signs. The Institute's massive terraforming engines, designed to transform Kepler-186f's atmosphere, operated on principles of absolute precision. They attempted to control every variable, every molecular interaction, every energy transfer. It was an approach that reflected the collective mentality of the advanced species that had designed them, a belief that with enough computing power and sophisticated technology, nature itself could be commanded to follow their exact specifications. But Isabella knew better. Earth's history had taught humanity a crucial lesson: ecosystems were not machines. They were dynamic, interconnected webs of chaos and order, death and renewal. The Institute's rigid approach wasn't just inefficient, it was fighting against the fundamental nature of life itself. Late one evening, as the 3 suns of the Centauri system cast their overlapping shadows through her lab's window, Isabella received another visit from Dr. Venare. The probability specialist's form shimmered with unusual patterns, suggesting agitation. The latest test results, Venare said without preamble, their compound eyes reflecting cascading data streams. The atmospheric processors are showing microscopic fluctuations. The others dismiss it as measurement error, but my calculations suggest a cascade effect, Isabella finished, pulling up her own analysis. The system is trying to self-correct, but the rigid control parameters are forcing it back into alignment. It's like trying to hold back a tide, eventually, something has to give. Venare's probability field pulsed with concern. The leading researchers won't listen. They've invested too much of their reputations in the current approach. But perhaps you could develop an alternative? Isabella hesitated. She had been working on something, an idea so unconventional it seemed almost heretical by the Institute's standards. Instead of trying to control every aspect of the terraforming process, her approach would work with the planet's natural tendencies, introducing carefully selected Earth organisms that could adapt and evolve to Kepler-186f's conditions. I have a prototype design, she admitted, bringing up a holographic model. It's based on how Earth's earliest organisms transformed our planet's atmosphere. Rather than forcing immediate change, it would seed the process and guide it, allowing natural systems to establish themselves gradually. The model showed swarms of modified bacteria, similar to Earth's ancient cyanobacteria, that could survive in Kepler-186f's harsh environment. These microscopic pioneers would begin the slow work of atmospheric transformation, paving the way for more complex organisms. Unlike the Institute's machines, these living engines of change could adapt to unexpected conditions. Venare studied the model intensely, their probability field flickering through complex calculations. The approach is elegant, they finally admitted. But it would take decades longer than the current plan. Better a slow success than a catastrophic failure, Isabella argued. The Institute's approach is like trying to build a skyscraper from the top down. We need to establish a foundation first, let the changes take root naturally. Their discussion was interrupted by a commotion in the main laboratory complex. The latest round of atmospheric processing tests was underway, and something was wrong. Isabella and Venare rushed to join the crowd of researchers gathering around the main monitoring station. Dr. Zixera's scales were flashing warning patterns as they analyzed the incoming data. The processing grid is showing unexpected molecular interactions. The atmosphere is becoming unstable. Chief Researcher Nixtal's crystalline form had clouded to an opaque gray. Impossible. Our calculations were perfect. The variables were all accounted for. Isabella pushed her way forward, quickly scanning the readings. The cascade effect she predicted was beginning, much sooner than expected. The terraforming engines, in their attempt to maintain absolute control, were fighting against the atmosphere's natural tendency to seek equilibrium. The result was a dangerous buildup of energy in the system. You have to shut it down, she called out. The system is overcorrecting. It's creating a feedback loop. Dr. Rail's energy form crackled with dismissal. Silence, human. This is beyond your understanding. The system will stabilize once it processes these minor anomalies. But Isabella could see in the data that it wouldn't. The rigid protocols programmed into the terraforming engines were actually amplifying the problem. Each correction created new imbalances, which triggered more corrections, in an accelerating cycle of chaos. As alarms began to sound throughout the complex, Isabella rushed back to her lab. She had been developing simulations of her alternative approach, but now she needed more than theories. If the current system failed catastrophically, as she feared it would, the Institute would need a viable alternative immediately. Her hands flew over the holographic controls as she refined her design. The living systems she proposed wouldn't just transform Kepler-186f's atmosphere, they would become part of it, creating a self-sustaining cycle of renewal and adaptation. It was an approach that embraced the messy, unpredictable nature of life itself. A sudden power surge rocked the station, causing the lights to flicker. Through her lab window, Isabella could see emergency teams rushing toward the main terraforming control center. Time was running out. She looked at her incomplete work, then at the chaos unfolding beyond her window. The question wasn't whether the Institute's approach would fail, but whether they would be willing to accept an alternative before it was too late. As another surge shook the station, Isabella made her decision. It was time to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in controlling nature, but in learning to work with it. The Centauri Research Institute's emergency systems bathed the corridors in pulsing crimson light as Isabella raced toward the main control center. Behind her, the portable drive containing her alternative terraforming protocols felt heavy in her pocket, a weight of responsibility as much as mass. The control center was chaos incarnate. Alien researchers moved in frantic patterns, their various bioluminescent features creating a disturbing light show of panic. The main holographic display showed Kepler-186f's atmosphere churning with unstable energy patterns, the Institute's terraforming engines still stubbornly trying to impose order on growing chaos. The containment fields are failing, Dr. Zixera announced, their scales flashing emergency patterns. Energy buildup has exceeded all predicted parameters. Chief Researcher Nixtal's crystalline form had become almost completely opaque with stress. Increase power to the stabilization grid. We must maintain control. You can't control this. Isabella pushed through the crowd, pulling up her own analysis on a secondary display. Look at the pattern. Every attempt at correction is making it worse. The system is fighting back against artificial constraints. Dr. Rail's energy form crackled with fury. Your presence here is neither required nor welcome, human. This is a technical problem that requires a technical solution. But Isabella stood her ground, enlarging specific sections of the data stream. These energy signatures, they're almost identical to patterns we saw during Earth's Great Oxidation event. When our planet's earliest life forms transformed the atmosphere, they triggered cascading changes that couldn't be predicted or controlled. They could only be guided. The room fell silent as another alarm blared, this one more urgent than the last. The main display showed critical failures spreading through the terraforming engines. The Institute's perfect machinery, designed to enforce order on a planetary scale, was beginning to tear itself apart. We have 18 minutes before total system failure, Dr. Venare announced, their probability field radiating waves of concern. If the engines explode at current energy levels, they'll trigger an atmospheric chain reaction. Kepler 186f will be rendered uninhabitable for millennia. Isabella took a deep breath. This was her moment. I have a solution. But you're not going to like it. She plugged her drive into the main system, bringing up her alternative design. The holographic display filled with images of her modified bacteria, along with projected models of their atmospheric impact. We need to shut down the engines and switch to a biological approach. These organisms are designed to work with the planet's natural processes, not against them. Preposterous. Dr. Rail's form flickered violently. You expect us to abandon centuries of proven technological advancement for microscopic Earth life? Your proven technology is about to destroy an entire planet, Isabella countered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. These organisms are based on the same life forms that made Earth habitable in the first place. They're designed to adapt, to respond to changing conditions. Unlike machines, they can evolve. Chief researcher Nixtal studied the display, their crystalline forms slowly regaining some transparency. The implementation time would be exponentially longer than our current approach. But the changes would be permanent, Isabella argued. Instead of forcing the atmosphere into an artificial state, we'd be establishing a genuine ecosystem. One that could sustain itself without constant technological intervention. Another explosion rocked the station. On the main display, the terraforming engine's power levels were approaching critical mass. Time was running out. Dr. Venare's probability field suddenly pulsed with intense patterns. I've completed the calculations. The human's approach has a 64.8% chance of long-term success, compared to our current situation which has a 97.3% chance of catastrophic failure. The numbers hung in the air like a challenge. Isabella could see the internal struggle playing out across her alien colleagues' features. Their entire worldview was based on the superiority of their advanced technology. Accepting a solution based on primitive Earth biology would be an incredible blow to their pride. Think about why you're here, Isabella pressed. The goal isn't to prove whose technology is superior. It's to make Kepler 186f habitable. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. A violent shudder ran through the station. Warning lights flashed across every display as the terraforming engines began to overload. In the midst of the chaos, Isabella noticed something remarkable. The alien researchers weren't looking to Dr. Rail or even Chief Researcher Nixtal for guidance. They were looking at her. The shutdown sequence takes 3 minutes to execute, Dr. Zixera said, their scales now showing patterns of reluctant acceptance. If we're going to implement your solution, we need to start now. Chief Researcher Nixtal's form finally cleared to its natural crystalline transparency. Dr. Rivera, I hope you understand the responsibility you're taking on. If this fails. It won't, Isabella said with a confidence she wished she fully felt. But we need to work fast. And I'm going to need everyone's help. As the assembled researchers rushed to their stations, Isabella felt the weight of the moment. She had convinced them to try her solution, but implementation would be the true test. They would need to adapt her Earth-based designs to work with alien technology, and they would have to do it before the failing terraforming engines reached critical mass. The next few minutes would either validate humanity's place among the stars or confirm every doubt her alien colleagues had ever harbored. As Isabella began directing the complex shutdown sequence, she silently thanked every Earth scientist whose work had led to this moment. She was about to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in dominating nature, but in understanding how to work in harmony with it. The next 15 minutes in the Centauri Research Institute's control center redefined the meaning of organized chaos. Isabella found herself at the heart of a complex dance, coordinating teams of alien scientists who had, until moments ago, dismissed her very presence among them. Containment Field 3 is offline, Dr. Zixera reported, their scales flickering between emergency patterns. Beginning emergency venting of excess energy. Isabella's fingers flew across the holographic controls, adjusting parameters as she received data from multiple teams. Her solution wasn't as simple as just releasing modified bacteria into Kepler-186f's atmosphere. They needed to create the right conditions for the organisms to survive and thrive. Dr. Venare, I need probability calculations for optimal release points, she called out. We need to identify atmospheric currents that will provide the widest possible distribution. The probability specialists' form shimmered as they processed vast amounts of data. Calculating. But the atmospheric instability from the failing engines is creating unprecedented patterns. That was the problem with the entire situation, Isabella realized. The Institute's scientists were brilliant, but they were paralyzed by unprecedented scenarios. They needed data, precedent, certainty. Humanity, on the other hand, had learned to thrive in uncertainty. We don't need perfect conditions, Isabella announced, pulling up a new simulation. These organisms are designed to adapt. We just need to give them a fighting chance. Dr. Rail, who had been surprisingly quiet since the implementation began, suddenly spoke up. Your confidence in such primitive life forms is difficult to comprehend. Isabella didn't look up from her work as she responded. Life on Earth began in conditions far more hostile than this. The first organisms didn't wait for perfect conditions, they created them. A warning klaxon cut through the tension. Chief Researcher Nixtal's crystalline form clouded as they announced, the primary terraforming engine's core is approaching critical temperature. We have 7 minutes until catastrophic failure. Ready for initial deployment, Isabella said, bringing up the release protocols. But I need full access to the station's biocontainment systems. There was a moment of hesitation. The biocontainment systems were one of the station's most secured areas, protecting the galaxy from potentially dangerous cross-contamination between worlds. Giving a human full access was unprecedented. Granted, Chief Researcher Nixtal said finally. All security protocols are temporarily suspended under emergency authorization. Isabella's modified bacteria, developed in secret during her long nights of isolation, were about to face their ultimate test. These weren't just Earth organisms, she had enhanced them using insights gained from studying alien biotechnology, creating hybrid life forms that combined Earth's adaptability with advanced alien capabilities. Beginning deployment sequence, she announced. Dr. Venare, I need real-time probability tracking of atmospheric dispersion patterns. The release began. On the main display, they could see swarms of microscopic life entering Kepler-186f's turbulent atmosphere. The failing terraforming engines had created conditions of chaos, but to Isabella's enhanced bacteria, chaos was an opportunity. Remarkable, Dr. Zixera observed, their scales showing patterns of scientific fascination. The organisms are already beginning to multiply and adapt. Isabella allowed herself a small smile. They're doing what life does best, finding a way forward. But their success was far from certain. The failing engines were still pumping massive amounts of energy into the atmosphere, creating conditions that even her adaptable organisms might not survive. They needed to shut down the engines completely, but doing so too quickly could trigger the very catastrophe they were trying to prevent. We need to synchronize the engine shutdown with the bacterial spread, Isabella said. Too fast, and we'll lose atmospheric containment. Too slow, and the engines will explode. It was Dr. Rail who surprised everyone by offering a solution. The energy discharge could be redirected to create thermal updrafts. Your organisms could ride these currents, achieving maximum dispersal before the systems fail completely. Isabella stared at the energy being for a moment, then quickly ran the calculations. That could work. But we'd need perfect timing. Then it is fortunate, Dr. Venare's probability field pulsed, that you have the galaxy's finest scientists at your disposal. What followed was a symphony of cooperation unlike anything the Institute had ever seen. Alien technologies and human ingenuity merged as they executed the most delicate atmospheric engineering operation ever attempted. The failing engines, once instruments of rigid control, became tools for dispersing Earth's adaptable life forms throughout Kepler 186f's atmosphere. As the final engine powered down, a tense silence fell over the control center. On the main display, Kepler 186f's atmosphere churned with activity. Billions upon billions of modified bacteria were already at work, beginning the slow but steady process of transformation. Initial readings are promising, Chief Researcher Nixtal announced. The atmospheric instability is decreasing. The organisms appear to be establishing successful colonies. Isabella released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. They'll need time. The changes won't happen overnight, but they'll be sustainable. Natural. Dr. Rail's energy form flickered thoughtfully. Perhaps there is something to be said for your Earth methods after all. Not just Earth methods, Isabella corrected, looking around at her alien colleagues. What we just did here, combining human adaptability with your advanced science, that's something entirely new. The crisis had passed, but its implications were just beginning to ripple through the Institute. As Isabella watched her colleagues studying the data from their unprecedented experiment, she realized that more than just Kepler 186f's atmosphere had been transformed today. The barrier between human and alien approaches to science had begun to break down, creating something far more powerful than either could achieve alone. 3 months after the crisis, Isabella stood before the Institute's observation window, watching the swirling atmosphere of Kepler 186f below. The planet's once toxic orange haze had begun showing traces of blue-green, visible evidence of her modified bacteria at work. It was a slow transformation, but an undeniable one. The Institute itself had undergone an equally profound transformation. The same chamber where Isabella had once faced skepticism and derision now hosted regular collaborative sessions between human and alien scientists. Her successful integration of Earth-based biological solutions with advanced alien technology had opened new avenues of research across multiple fields. Your latest atmospheric readings are quite fascinating, Dr. Rivera, said a familiar crystalline voice behind her. Chief Researcher Nixtal approached the window, their form refracting the starlight in complex patterns. The rate of transformation exceeds even your optimistic projections. Isabella nodded, pulling up a holographic display of the latest data. The bacteria aren't just surviving, they're thriving. Each generation adapts more efficiently to the environment. They're evolving faster than we anticipated. Life finding a way forward, came another voice as Dr. Rail's energy form materialized nearby. I believe those were your words during the crisis. The being's tone held none of its former contempt, replaced instead by genuine curiosity. We've begun applying similar principles to other terraforming projects. The results are promising. The admission brought a smile to Isabella's face. The Institute's approach to planetary transformation had fundamentally shifted. Instead of trying to force immediate change through brute technological force, they now work to establish the conditions for natural evolution and adaptation. It was a merger of methodologies that drew on the strengths of both human and alien understanding. Dr. Venare appeared, their probability field showing patterns of satisfaction. The latest calculations suggest an 89.7% chance of complete atmospheric transformation within 50 years. Significantly faster than traditional methods, once we account for long-term stability. More importantly, Isabella added, the changes will be self-sustaining. We're not just transforming the planet, we're helping it transform itself. The observation chamber began filling with other researchers as the time approached for Isabella's presentation to the Institute's Grand Council. In the months since the crisis, her small laboratory had become a hub of interspecies collaboration. Young alien scientists eagerly sought to learn about Earth's history of environmental adaptation, while human researchers across the galaxy were now being recruited for their unique perspectives. Dr. Rivera, Dr. Zixera called out, their scales showing patterns of academic excitement. The council has arrived. Isabella turned from the window to face the assembled dignitaries. The chamber now held representatives from dozens of advanced civilizations, all eager to learn about the new hybrid approach to planetary engineering. But more significantly, she noticed several human scientists among them, new recruits to the Institute, no longer seen as primitive outsiders but as valuable contributors to galactic science. Distinguished members of the Council, Isabella began, her voice steady with newfound confidence. 3 months ago, we faced a crisis that threatened to render Kepler 186f uninhabitable. In addressing that crisis, we discovered something far more valuable than a solution to a single problem. We discovered the power of combining our different approaches to science. The holographic display expanded, showing the progressive transformation of Kepler 186f's atmosphere. Humanity's greatest strength has never been our technology. It's been our ability to adapt, to find creative solutions, to work with natural processes rather than against them. When we combine this approach with the advanced technologies and precise methodologies of other civilizations, we create something greater than the sum of its parts. She gestured to her diverse team of colleagues. This is the future of galactic science. Not one species or civilization claiming superiority over others, but all of us working together, learning from each other, finding new ways to solve the challenges that face us all. The council members murmured in approval as Isabella shared the detailed results of their work. The success on Kepler 186f had implications far beyond a single planet. It represented a new paradigm in scientific cooperation, one that valued diversity of thought as much as technological advancement. After the presentation, as the chamber slowly emptied, Chief Researcher Nixtal approached Isabella again. When you first arrived at the Institute, I saw only what your species lacked: advanced technology, centuries of scientific development, access to galactic knowledge. I failed to see what you could offer. Isabella smiled. And what do you see now? I see that true progress comes not from perfection, but from adaptation. Not from ruling nature, but from understanding it. These are lessons humanity learned through necessity, and now you have taught them to us. The crystalline being's form shimmered with respect. The universe is vast and full of challenges we have yet to face. Perhaps the combination of human ingenuity and alien technology is exactly what we need to face them. Looking back at Kepler 186f, Isabella watched a swirl of blue-green atmosphere dance across its surface. The planet was coming alive, not through force or control, but through the patient work of countless microscopic pioneers, each adapting and evolving in their own way. It was a testament to the power of working with nature rather than against it, and a symbol of what different species could achieve when they chose to work together. The first human scientist at the Centauri Research Institute had done more than prove her worth. She had helped forge a new path forward, one that would shape the future of galactic science for generations to come. As Isabella watched more human scientists arriving at the Institute, eager to contribute their unique perspectives, she knew that this was just the beginning.